He then shows a pinned tweet from Biofrog that says, "I am doing this because I think it's disgusting how Palworld glorifies animal abuse."
They've been this way for years, so it's no surprise that they're suing Palworld. I'm actually surprised it took them this long. For a while, I thought it maybe wasn't going to happen because Palworld, when it came out, everyone compared it to Pokemon. I called it Pokemon with guns, everyone called it Pokemon with guns.
Oh no. She's gonna show for Palworld. If this, man, I can't wait until like Nintendo wins the lawsuit and these people have to take like a big fat L.
So they went to the Japanese patent office recently and they changed the patent language regarding smooth switching of writing objects. Now, it's very interesting because they didn't make it more clear. They actually added a bunch of legal gobbledygook. We call it legalese, right?
Palworld is an open-world survival crafting game with tameable creatures that came out in January of 2024 and immediately made waves for Pocket Pair. Its parent company, topping third on Steam in the most played games category alone, even beating out CSGO, on Valve's own platform no less, and placing very high on other platforms such as Xbox. However, despite its massive initial popularity, Palworld did not have the cleanest rise to fame. On the contrary, while many did enjoy the game, it also received quite a fair bit of backlash and complaints, from Nintendo fans right up to the Big N itself. Nintendo, who filed a lawsuit against Palworld regarding patent infringements, which I will cover more in depth later on. The biggest complaint from Nintendo and their fans is that they seem to think that Palworld is like cheap Pokemon copycat, despite the fact that Palworld plays nothing like Pokemon, and outside of some superficial similarities, they could not be more different if they tried. Open world crafting survival versus turn-based RPG. Apples to oranges. Personally, while I did enjoy playing Palworld and had fun doing it, it did feel a bit incomplete at times, with a bunch of feel-good concepts not fully executed out yet. While that is to be expected, with it still being an early access game and all that, those issues were still present, but overall the game was still pretty good. I mean, I ended up racking up a fair bit of hours on Palworld, so... And don't get me wrong, I also really liked Pokemon too. It was a large part of my childhood growing up, and I really enjoyed playing the games, but I found that over the years, the Pokemon story and gameplay is formulaic and repetitive, like how COD and FIFA have also gone stale and repetitive over the years. And don't even get me started with the sheer laziness they put into Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, from the low frame rates to lazy animations, and the ending credits where you can see that they left the mouse pointer in. It just goes to show how rushed Pokemon Scarlet and Violet was, and how lazy Nintendo and Game Freak were. Multi-million-dollar companies, by the way. As a matter of fact, I'm actually glad that Palworld blew up and became so popular, in the hopes that it will finally to make more innovative mainstream Pokemon games, resulting in more good games overall for people to play. I also think the Pocket Pair devs have very likable personalities in terms of game devs. From not putting microtransactions or DLCs into their games when they could have very easily done so, and just giving everyone free massive content updates. And when the player base for Palworld slowly started dwindling because people got bored of playing a single player game, the devs actually said that was fine and to take a break and come back whenever you feel like it, which is a huge breath of fresh air from the usual FOMO type content that most games put out nowadays. But I'm getting sidetracked. Today I will be covering the hostile responses and opposition that Palworld faced from both Nintendo and its fans, and we will see how justified their complaints are. Now, it's no secret that Nintendo has some of the most diehard fanboys out there, and to some degree, I kinda get it. Nintendo has made some quality bangers over the years. They put in the work game-wise, so I can understand the fanboyism from a gaming perspective. However, they leave much to be desired in other fields, such as their very draconic enforcement on copyright. We all know how Nintendo treats the Pokemon fan games. Unfortunately, it's a real shame that these Nintendo fanboys can't recognize this, and choose to defend Nintendo regardless of the context. Basically doing the "leave the multi-billion-dollar company alone" meme. When Palworld started gaining popularity, instead of being glad that there was another game where you could tame and make monsters fight for you, they decided to lash out in a childish rage instead. Nintendo fans are the type of people to get two cakes and get angry since one of the cakes has the same flavored frosting as the other. It's also kind of weird how Nintendo/Pokemon fans seem to be the only group of people who are very hostile towards the concept of games having similarities. Other groups seem to not care/welcome the concept of similar new games in their genres, yet Pokemon has some elitism around it. It's also funny how they talk about Palworld being a Pokemon ripoff when the Pocket Pair devs themselves have said that they were inspired by games like Ark Survival and their methods of taming creatures, and Rust for their survival mechanics. So it's just Pokemon fans getting mad at the concept of taming creatures and capturing them in small objects. Yeah, sorry, I don't care what Nintendo themselves say. The concept of only Pokemon being allowed to do that is dumb as fuck. And I know I'm gonna get some people saying, oh, so Palworld isn't a Pokemon ripoff, it's an Ark Survival ripoff instead. They just steal other mechanics like from Rust 2. Which is just stupid considering how you can't really say that only one game is allowed to own the open world survival tame creatures genre. That's like saying you can't become a baker because other people have already made cake and bread, and you would just be a filthy plagiarist ripoff of them. But let's take a look at what Pokemon fans had to say about Palworld. One such claim is a post thread saying that Palworld is just shamelessly ripping off Pokemon, which is just outright laughable, especially when you look at some of the examples. Look guys, Palworld and Nintendo have a sheep-based creature. I can't believe this. No way, I just did some more research and I found out that apparently something called the real world also has sheep, foxes, and ferrets. Wow, I can't believe that the real world is just blatantly copying and stealing Nintendo's Pokemon designs. Nintendo should sue them ASAP. Oh look guys, they both have yellow electric creatures. Only Nintendo is allowed to use yellow electric creatures, okay? No one else can ever think of this. Same goes for mole creatures. Some more stuff that's also a reach is saying how creatures like Warsect are an Aggron ripoff despite the fact that Warsect is clearly based on a rhinoceros beetle. Or how Penking is a ripoff of Empoleon for the crime of being a blue penguin. Or how Jolthog is a shaman ripoff for the crime of having a hedgehog body. A fair bit of the complaints also revolved around design themes, like Nintendo didn't have design themes around real-world animals. It's also super ironic and funny that while Pokemon fans were talking about Palworld ripping off from Pokemon, when Pokemon was actually first based off Dragon Quest. That's right, in Dragon Quest V, there is a mechanic where you can recruit monsters to join your party, which ended up being the founding concept for Pokemon in its entirety. Wow, that's crazy. I can't believe that Pokemon is a ripoff of Dragon Quest down to its very core features. This also means that it's super hypocritical for Nintendo to be suing Palworld for using game mechanics similar to Pokemon. More info on that later on, when the concept of Pokemon was built off a game mechanic from another game. The author of this post thread even states in a follow-up post that they don't believe that a good chunk of the designs were plagiarized, and that they purposely included a lot of stretches to try and stretch out their thread, ironically only muddying the waters and making it harder for people to say that Palworld is a ripoff, even though it's proven that Palworld didn't rip off Pokemon designs because Nintendo didn't sue Palworld for infringing on Pokemon designs. I like how this person says plagiarism, and the plagiarism in question is Pokemon and Palworld both using animals from the real world. One of the more egregious plagiarism claims I've seen though, is the claim that Palworld is just blatantly ripping off 3D models from Pokemon and incorporating it into their own pals. Unsurprisingly, that's yet another dishonest framing. If you take a while to examine the two models, you will notice that there are multiple differences between them. If Palworld really stole from Nintendo, then the amount of vertices in each asset should be the exact same. There is no part in each mesh that overlaps perfectly aside from height. And later on, the person who made the 3D modeling copy accusations admitted that they scaled the Palworld model to match the Pokemon one. So the worst thing you can say about the Palworld meshes is that they were heavily inspired from Pokemon, but that's about it. There's no crime in being heavily inspired by something to make another thing. Even if after all of this you still don't believe me when I say that Palworld didn't copy Pokemon 3D models, guess what? The person who started the rumors later on admitted that they fabricated the allegations of Palworld being 3D model plagiarists because they apparently didn't like the fact that Palworld was edgy and had animal abuse. What astounding good faith discussion over Palworld. It's okay to lie about stuff if they're edgy and I don't like it, okay? Sure, in Pokemon you can breed and release baby Pokemon en masse into the wild to have them get killed by other wild Pokemon. But let me guess, out of sight, out of mind. In all seriousness though, while I do see the resemblance in some of the designs, honestly, who cares? There's over 1,000 Pokemon. Statistically, you might get some similarities after a while, especially if you base creatures off the same animals that Pokemon did. Nobody tell the Palworld copied Pokemon crowd about music artists and sampling. Let's just say they would have a field day calling musicians filthy plagiarizers. It's so funny how they harp on the Palworld plagiarized Pokemon due to them having some vague concepts that overlap, because by their logic, is Seth MacFarlane a filthy plagiarist for creating the Orville when Star Trek already exists? I mean, they're both sci-fis with an emphasis on space exploration. Also, even from a gaming perspective, while people will say Palworld is just Pokemon with guns, and while I do see where people are coming from, I feel like that's a bit of an oversimplification. Palworld plays completely different from any Pokemon game that I've seen and offers a completely unique experience exploring compared to Pokemon. If you really want to compare Palworld to another game, I'd say Ark Survival fits it a lot better. The best way that I describe some of the Palworld and Pokemon designs is a college professor giving an essay assignment while giving out sample essays. As reference points only, of course. So when people turn in their uniquely worded essays, they are structured similar to the sample essays. So while you can see where they got the idea, it is not plagiarism. Even if despite all this you still want to say that Palworld ripped off Nintendo's Pokemon designs and plagiarized, the fact that Nintendo or Game Freak never filed any lawsuits for plagiarizing Pokemon designs is very telling to the reality of whether or not Palworld just shamelessly plagiarized Nintendo's Pokemon designs. If Nintendo truly thought that any of Palworld's designs was shamelessly copying theirs, they would have honed in on it. The next set of allegations take a darker turn though, when allegations surfaced that Palworld had used AI to make their designs. From what I've seen, there are two main reasons that people believe that Palworld used AI to generate their designs. The first point that claims Palworld is using AI is a post saying that the CEO of Pocket Pair is using AI to bypass copyright, and was eager for games generated by GPT. Unsurprisingly, those are all lies. The real context, which was rather conveniently left out, is based on the fact that the CEO was talking about BuzzFeed, who did use AI to make Fakemons. So when the CEO of Pocket Pair was talking about AI image generation, he was talking about it in relation to the AI generated Fakemons from BuzzFeed, meaning that Pocket Pair has zero intentions of using AI for Palworld. Now the other AI stint that Pocket Pair apparently had was based on a previous game that they made. Unsurprisingly again, this accusation that they maliciously used AI was out of context. The game in question is called AI Art Imposter, where the goal is a group of people use AI prompts to generate art, but one person has a wrong AI prompt and you have to find out who. Basically Among Us, but AI Art Edition. Okay, but how does this relate to Palworld? These are two completely different games with very different concepts. To think that the open world survival will use AI compared to a game where the main goal is AI image generation is laughable. These are two very different games with very different purposes. You are literally scraping the bottom of the barrel to tie some defunct game into Palworld. If you just want to criticize Pocket Pair for having a game that involves AI image generation, I wouldn't exactly be unreceptive to that. Because let's face it, while AI Art Imposter had an interesting premise, it was ultimately poorly made and had poor execution. In my opinion, of course. Personally, how I would have designed it was to have a group of people draw a prompt with one image AI generated and people had to find that AI generated image, but that's neither here nor now. There is no proof aside from since Pocket Pair toyed with the concept of AI images, they'll do it again. Yeah, I find that really hard to believe when the other proof that Palworld supports AI image generation was out of context posts talking about BuzzFeed using AI image generation. If you want to criticize Pocket Pair for having a game called AI Art Imposter, that's one thing. But to make up lies about Palworld using AI is an entirely different matter and shows how dishonest the anti-Palworld people are if they have to resort to such low blows. Because nothing screams reliable like people making up lies in order to further push their agendas. In conclusion, what I'm trying to say is that despite all the bad faith criticism that I've covered here, you can still criticize Palworld, because believe me, while I think Palworld is a good game, with some good concepts, it is far from completed and there are still many holes the devs need to patch up in the game. You can even not like Palworld and I wouldn't really have an issue with that. No game can satisfy everyone and Palworld is no exception. However, to outright lie and slander Palworld as using AI/plagiarizing Pokemon is outright malicious and only serves to divert people away from your side. That's when the issue happens, not from someone simply not liking a video game. Now, while I've mainly been talking about Pokemon/Nintendo fans so far, the next segment will expand to discussion of the Big N, Nintendo themselves, and how they've handled the release of Palworld. Now, it's no small secret that Nintendo isn't quite fond of Palworld, to put it lightly. As a matter of fact, when Palworld was first gaining popularity, Nintendo and Game Freak ended up putting out a statement regarding it. On the official Pokemon Company site, they have a statement talking about how they have received many inquiries regarding another company's game released in January of 2024. They proceed to follow up and say that they have not granted any permission for the use of Pokemon intellectual property or assets, and they will investigate and take appropriate measures to address any acts that infringe on intellectual property rights related to Pokemon. Blah blah blah, you guys get the idea. Which of course matches up with Palworld's release date. Honestly though, it's kind of impressive that Palworld left a big enough mark on the road that Nintendo/Game Freak had to make a public statement referencing it, even if it was in a vague sense. Although being top 5 on Steam for most played games will do that to you. Personally though, at the time when I first saw this post, I thought it was just big company vague speak generic bluster to let people know that Nintendo and Game Freak were aware of Palworld's existence. I genuinely thought that would be it and they wouldn't pursue the issue further, even with Nintendo's past history of being copyright IP enforcement heavy. Obviously, due to the power of hindsight, we now know that is no longer the case. I should have seen this coming though, especially considering that it's no small secret that Nintendo does not have the best relations regarding copyright on their IPs. And don't even get me started on the fact that they hand out cease and desists and legal takedown notices like it's candy on a Halloween night. A prime example of this is from a couple of years ago, from as early as 2013, where Nintendo would regularly strike down / claim ad revenue of anyone who would upload a Let's Play of their games. This obviously blew up in their faces, and I hope I shouldn't have to explain why deliberately trying to stop people from giving out free promos to your games is a bad idea. It's not even like people will lose interest in the game and not buy it afterwards if they see how it's played online, especially with how many different ways someone can play a game. Let's take a look at Pokemon for example. There's a ton of Pokemon combinations you can run in your team, and so many different places to explore. You're not going to get all of those combinations from just seeing someone play the game online. Also, what if someone just wants to see how the game plays to see if their monetary investment into the game is worth it? Each game you're buying from Nintendo is at least $40 on average, and don't even get me started on buying the game console itself, which costs hundreds of dollars. Can you kind of see why someone will want to see how the game plays before they decide to sink their money and time into it now? But Nintendo wasn't quite done yet. In an attempt to regain control over content produced based on their stuff, they tried to implement a creator program where they would take a 30 or 40% revenue cut, depending on whether or not you were registered with them, to anything Nintendo related regardless of the context involved. I also heard of other various 30-40% splits, where 30% of the revenue goes to Nintendo for single videos regarding them and their products, and 40% of the revenue goes to Nintendo if your entire channel is dedicated to Nintendo. Regardless of what's really true though, tomato tomato, either way you're still losing a significant chunk of revenue. Obviously, this unsurprisingly backfired on Nintendo also, because shocker, people don't like losing a large cut of revenue for simply talking about Nintendo, especially if they put in a lot of effort into making the video as transformative as possible. Because remember, this isn't only hitting Let's Plays, it's also hitting stuff like product/game reviews, fan projects, and game design analysis. If it's vaguely Nintendo related, expect a massive revenue cut. To top it off, this content partnership program by Nintendo is also just really lazy and greedy. Please explain to me why a company worth trillions at this point needs our money. Predictably, this garnered even more resentment towards Nintendo at the time. And between that whole fiasco and the Wii U bombing, Nintendo eventually decided to reverse this decision entirely. I mean, props to them for finally doing the right thing, but it shouldn't have taken you a few years to realize that you've made a massive mistake. Nintendo has also been very heavy-handed, shall we say, in enforcing their IP protection/copyright in regards to fan works. Like how they demanded that the custom Etika themed Joy-Cons, aka Etikons, can no longer be sold anymore. Keep in mind that the guy who made those Joy-Cons, aka Captain Alex, only made the Joy-Cons so he could donate the profits to charity in Etika's memory. Yeah, you know Etika, the guy who devoted a large portion of his life to Nintendo products who tragically passed away due to mental illness? Yeah, fuck his memory, lol. Or what about all of the no-profit Pokemon fan games that Nintendo has sent cease and desist letters to? Simply because people actually like playing those games and enjoyed them much more than any recent mainstay Pokemon title. Some notable examples of this include Pokemon Uranium, and of course the original Pixelmon mod for Minecraft. And don't even get me started on the fact that Nintendo told a speedrunning charity that they couldn't use any of their games until the very last minute, forcing them to drop Nintendo games from the roster and severely impacting the state of the charity, despite RTA, the speedrunning charity, has used Nintendo games for several years in the past without issue. While the common excuse for this is that Nintendo is a private company and they can do what they want. Why did they wait until it was too late for RTA to get permission to use Nintendo games before letting them know that they couldn't have Nintendo games? It's a charity event. It's not like they're just trying to make a quick buck off of Nintendo's games. Especially when they have done it before with zero issues. You couldn't have given them time to negotiate with you and work out some sort of deal? But ultimately, all of these events paint a picture of a company that is very eager to flex its authority and flex its power in a display of dominance. Kind of like a Japanese version of Disney. Which is why I'm honestly not surprised why they ended up suing Pocket Pair / Palworld in September of 2024. Nintendo and the Pokemon Company so far want a payment of 10 million yen total plus any late payment damages. In sharp contrast, Pocket Pair has proven time and time again just how much more likable they are, especially with how much more humble and grateful they are. And I know I'm gonna get people who are like, oh, he's simping for a company, lol! You guys are missing the point. I am talking about based on what I have seen, so far at least. Pocket Pair seems much more humble and charitable. Obviously in the future they could do a 180 and completely snap, and I would obviously disavow that. But I'm saying so far they seem to have a really solid head on their shoulders. A key instance of this is when the hype for Palworld died down because, shocker, people eventually lost interest in playing an early access single player game, which caused gaming news outlets circling around like vultures with clickbaity titles like The Fall of Palworld. In response to these news articles, Pocket Pair decided to release a post talking about how it was fine to take a break from their game, and they will always be there releasing content and you can come back and play whenever. Even encouraging people to hop from game to game instead of just hyper-focusing on one. That and the fact that Pocket Pair will never intend for any microtransactions in Palworld, and you have a welcome breath of fresh air in the gaming industry. But getting back on track to the Pocket Pair versus Nintendo lawsuit, on September 19, 2024, Nintendo released a statement talking about how they have filed a patent infringement lawsuit against Pocket Pair, saying how Palworld infringes on multiple patent rights, and how Nintendo will continue to take necessary actions against any infringement of its intellectual property rights. Blah blah blah, generic legal announcement, you get the idea. Pocket Pair responded with their own counter statement, where they talk about how they have received notice of this lawsuit and will begin the appropriate legal proceedings and investigations into the claims of patent infringement. It is interesting to note how Nintendo hasn't even informed Pocket Pair of the specific patents that they've infringed upon. Now, admittedly, I am not sure how a large-scale lawsuit would be carried out. But it seems kind of weird that Nintendo won't even tell Pocket Pair what they're being sued for, no? It just seems like right now Nintendo decided to petty file a lawsuit and they're just gonna make something up along the way. Now, while many people thought that Nintendo initially filed the lawsuit because Palworld copied Pokemon designs too close to the sun, it's actually not the case. Ironically proving even more that Nintendo didn't copy Pokemon designs because, again, if Nintendo thought they had a chance of suing Palworld for copying designs, they would've. Let's face it, if Nintendo could, they would sue anyone named Mario for IP infringement. There's no way that they wouldn't sue Pocket Pair for copyright infringement on Pokemon designs. Unless Pocket Pair never copied Pokemon designs in the first place. As a matter of fact, Nintendo never filed a copyright infringement claim, which is intended for artistic works. Nintendo decided to file a lawsuit instead based on patent infringement. So basically the main reason that Pocket Pair is being sued by Nintendo is because Nintendo felt that Palworld was stealing a unique concept claimed by themselves. Or concepts in this case. Now, patent laws for video game features aren't exactly unprecedented. An example of this is with Bandai Namco and their patent for mini-games during loading screens. So they were essentially the only game development group that was able to have any sort of mini-game in a loading screen. Then there was also the dialogue wheel in Mass Effect, where I kid you not, they had a copyright on expressing dialogue options in wheel form. Or what about directional arrows, which are copyrighted by Sega, which made it so no other game can have arrows pointing to their destination, and if you tried, you get sued like Sega suing Simpsons Road Rage for infringement back in 2003. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I think all of this, including Nintendo stuff, is insane to copyright. Yeah, no one else is allowed to make the same stylistic choices as some big game company. Only they are allowed to use really vague concepts for their own personal use. Yeah, in case you couldn't tell, I think a lot of these game patents are really stupid. I am of course including Nintendo's game patents in these as well. Honestly, I shouldn't have been too surprised that Nintendo was going to file a lawsuit eventually, considering how petty they are with this kind of stuff. They may not have filed the lawsuit for copyright purposes, but like I said before, Nintendo is very petty when it comes to enforcing their IP. Also, add on to the fact that Nintendo is claiming patent infringement, which means that Nintendo has a large range of how they can act on their pettiness and sue Pocket Pair for, due to how patents are worded. When a patent is created, it's worded in a very vague way so that it can encompass the largest area possible. To summarize, patents basically need to cover as many conditions as possible, so as a result they need to be overly broad, ensuring that anyone reproducing a patent is in violation unless they are licensing it. And considering how long Nintendo has been around, it's not hard to imagine all the vaguely worded patents that they have lying around to attack Pocket Pair with. Just look at some of these super broad patents that Nintendo has. I want you to pause the video and then tell me with a straight face that some of these patents couldn't apply to other games and that Nintendo could press those other games if they wanted. There is an insane number of Nintendo patents recorded on Justia patents if you want to look at some more. But personally, I'm tired of reading about patents that end up just describing game/information processing and storage mediums. But ultimately, Nintendo decided to settle on a couple patents for their lawsuit. Specifically, the features that Nintendo and the Pokemon Company claimed that Pocket Pair stole were apparently the process of capturing creatures and objects and owning them/making them fight for you, an aiming system for deploying capture items, which I will consider grouped into the first point, and the ability to smoothly change between different types of mounts, for a grand total of 3 patents. But they all just revolve around the concept of either capturing creatures with objects or mounting and riding animals. The ultimate consequence of this lawsuit right now, aside from the obvious fact that Pocket Pair is suffering from a joint lawsuit from both Nintendo and the Pokemon Company, is the fact that Pocket Pair had to push out updates to Palworld removing the offending features, which is the ability to summon pals by throwing pal spears and instead is now a static summon next to the player, and another change where gliding will be performed using a glider rather than with pals. I'm still surprised that Nintendo and the Pokemon Company still filed the lawsuit, especially considering at the time how out of the spotlight Palworld was. Like, don't get me wrong, Palworld still holds a decent player count even to this day, but compared to the original hype, it's chump change, which is a major reason why I was even surprised that Nintendo filed the lawsuit. But then again, their pettiness knows no bounds. But overall though, yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I think that the lawsuits are completely pointless. Especially considering how vague patents are generally worded. You guys saw some of the Nintendo patents that I've shown earlier. If Nintendo really wanted, they could try and apply their patents to a wide variety of games and companies to file lawsuits on. Granted, they only have Palworld in their sights right now, and they probably won't strike out at any other games or companies, but it's not reassuring to know that a multi-trillion-dollar company has the capacity to strike at any time. Wouldn't you agree? But let's be real. We all know the only real reason why they're focusing their efforts on Palworld, and that's because for better or worse, people consider Palworld as Pokemon but with guns, with some Ark survival and Rust exploration and survival mechanics. And Pocket Pair showed the people a slice of what Pokemon could be, and how much more potential Pokemon could have if it wasn't wasted on the same copy-paste formula that sometimes isn't even copy-pasted right. Not to mention how many more innovative features that Palworld had compared to Pokemon, and how people had more fun playing Palworld as a result. The crazy part too is that Palworld is still early access, meaning that the game is still technically incomplete, and yet despite that, people still had way more fun with it than any recent mainstay Pokemon game, which is a bland copy-paste of previous generations, much like COD or FIFA at this point. And even then, the games still get fucked up, like with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Multi-billion trillion dollar company or whatever, by the way. In short, Pocket Pair one-up Pokemon, and Nintendo couldn't have that now, could they? Also, this lawsuit is stupid because what Nintendo is suing Palworld for, which is capturing creatures and objects and riding them, on the basis that there are other games that utilize similar mechanics to what Nintendo is suing Palworld for. First off, there's Terraria with its summoning of creatures to fight for you and creature mounts to ride. Then there's obviously Ark, which is what Palworld was based off of, where you can tame and ride creatures. Craftopia, which is Pocket Pair's own game with throwing mechanics that predate Palworld. And Monster Hunter 4, where you can capture and subjugate wild beasts, not so dissimilar to Pokemon. I'm not even listing off these other games in a stitching way either, like, oh, Officer N, they're also breaking rules, get them too. I'm just saying that if Nintendo actually cared about enforcing their patents, they wouldn't have waited this long to start enforcing them. This only reinforces the fact that they are pursuing this lawsuit against Pocket Pair to be petty, since again, if Nintendo cared so much about patent enforcement, they would have gone after other games. With that being said, I would honestly be surprised if they went after any other game aside from Palworld with these patents. They seem very locked in on Palworld only, but hey, I also thought that Nintendo wouldn't sue Palworld at all, but here we are, so... It's very clear that the patent lawsuits are only because Palworld is too different for Nintendo to traditionally strike down using copyright like they did for Pokemon fan games. So they had to change tactics and bog Pocket Pair down in a lengthy lawsuit best case scenario, and worst case scenario, they outright win the lawsuit, setting a precedent for any future patent related lawsuits. I also have a semi-schizo theory that a major part of why Nintendo filed the lawsuit is because Pocket Pair is also based in Japan, so it is easy for Nintendo / the Pokemon Company to file the lawsuits since they don't have to worry about international law for some overseas country. Now, while people will refute this by saying that Nintendo has not hesitated in the past to send legal notices to overseas people, keep in mind that all the parties threatened were either single people or very small groups. To my knowledge, no semi-large company has come under Nintendo legal notice. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. But regardless of how you feel about Pocket Pair or Palworld, this lawsuit is simply ass cheeks. No cap. I could not imagine copywriting something as vague as gameplay mechanics and then proceeding to hoard them for the sole purpose of denying others a chance to use them. Not dissimilar to a dragon hoarding gold and sitting on it. All patent and gameplay mechanics does is stifle and suppress new games by putting a hard limiter on what they can and can't do, stifling creativity. This isn't like a copyright issue where it's like, okay, this game is clearly stealing designs from another game. They have to be stopped legally. I get that, but the idea of applying that same concept but to vague conceptual ideas is horrifying. Going back to the patent of minigames and loading screens, there was the minigames and loading screens patent where no one aside from Bandai Namco was able to have any sort of minigame. It is insane how a company is able to hold on and be able to restrict not even specific copyrighted design / artwork at this point. They are essentially just vague conceptual ideas that have been monopolized by large companies. Now, I know I'm going to get some people in the comments who are like, oh yeah, well patents are supposed to protect inventions. You just want people to steal stuff from other people. Yeah, well guess what? We're not talking about actual inventions here that need to be protected or actual valuable technological advancements. We are talking about vague concepts and ideas like playing any sort of minigame in loading screens, gliding with creatures, or capturing creatures in small portable containers. Hardly the world-changing inventions that patents are supposed to protect. Let alone sinking tons of cash on lawsuits against smaller companies just because people like their game better. To add on to the weirdness / unfairness of the lawsuit, it looks like Nintendo themselves aren't even fully sure on what exactly to hit Palworld for because while the lawsuit is still ongoing, the Big N decided to change up their patent language midway through. That's right, midway through the court proceedings, Nintendo just up and decided to go to the Japanese patent office and just outright change patent language regarding their smooth switching of writing objects. The main change to that patent appears to be a bunch of vague words and large chains of run-on sentences, including phrases like even when, which is considered really vague, especially by legal standards. This rewording with all of the extra sentences only make it harder to understand the patent as well as obviously making it more vague, which ironically opens it up to being shut down completely by a court system due to vagueness, completely undermining Nintendo's entire game plan. I have also seen speculation that they're trying to make the patent more wordy in order to try and confuse the judge, but unfortunately for them, the judge in charge of this case, Motoyuki Nakashima, has plenty of experience in patent law and can't be tricked by this strange rewording. Regardless of whether or not this change succeeds or fails though, it will stretch out the lawsuit giving Nintendo more opportunities to attack Palworld. While it isn't illegal to change patent wording midway through a lawsuit so long as the core concept is still the same, it is very unusual and rare to do so, and the only main reason why they would do this is because they believe that the original patent is going to fail for sure, unless they try something last minute for a last-ditch effort. Essentially, Nintendo is throwing a Hail Mary and hoping to prolong the lawsuit since it will take additional time to look at the revisions. Yeah, somehow I don't think that this lawsuit on Pocket Pair was filed in good faith if Nintendo has to drastically change patent wording midway through to try and nail Pocket Pair on patent infringement. Well, you see, Your Honor, after I changed the definition of patent infringement to what my victim is currently doing, they now violate patent law. please take them away. Goalpost shifting bit in a lawsuit. Even other patent lawyers like Florian Muller, who has 15 plus years of experience, are baffled and confused about the patent amendment, even going so far to say they have never seen even when or even if in a patent claim and how weird that is, despite the many patent claims he's seen that have been amended. It's very obvious to anyone that Nintendo has created a more vague patent in order to hit Pocket Pair. Other patent lawyers have also described these lawsuits as a very clear case of bullying, as Nintendo has admitted in their initial filing of lawsuits against Palworld that other games also do the same things that they're suing Palworld for. So at this point, Nintendo was saying the quiet part out loud and admitting that they were only going after Pocket Pair due to its huge success with Palworld. If Palworld never got as big as it was, Nintendo wouldn't have cared whatsoever. Just in case you still aren't fully sure whether or not Nintendo filed this lawsuit in good faith, I would like to point out that while Nintendo was having its original lawsuits in Japan, at the same time Nintendo filled out those patents and got them filed out in the US, meaning that Nintendo was able to secure new US patents mid-lawsuit, expanding out the scope of the lawsuit to be based in both Japan and the United States now. Yeah, somehow I don't think that Nintendo is acting in good faith, especially when they are trying to use US law to threaten Palworld, despite the fact that they already have an ongoing case in Japan. My best guess for this additional patent filing in the US is so that Nintendo can claim that Palworld violates 2 regions of patent law and not just one. But let's be real, it just comes across as Nintendo trying to blatantly swat down a competitor, because they are. Especially when they already have an ongoing lawsuit in Japan. Retroactively, filing out lawsuits with the intent of adding them to a current lawsuit pool is a dick move, regardless of how you spin it. The ironic part about Nintendo overplaying with the patents is that, like with the rewarding of the mountain patent, this could backfire on Nintendo also. Since now Pocket Pair can claim that Nintendo is only pursuing US patents because they couldn't get clear enough defined patents originally, which is pretty much true, let's be real. What, between the rewording of the mounting patent and the new US ones that are filed? This US patent filing can also affect a bunch of other games that use creatures in combat and also have creature mounts. Games like World of Warcraft, Diablo, Terraria, Elden Ring, Risk of Rain 2, and many more. This opens up tons of other games to facing potential lawsuits from Nintendo and establishes a negative precedent for game development in the US in the future. Despite the fact that Nintendo is only doing this to try and get at Palworld and probably doesn't care about any other games stealing patent ideas. As a matter of fact, I would actually be surprised if Nintendo went after any game that wasn't Palworld based on these patents. But you could see how Nintendo filing these US patents could make any game dev a little uneasy, especially considering Nintendo's past history. On a brighter note for Pocket Pair and Palworld though, things seem to be turning around for them in the legal department. In late October, the Japan Patent Office decided to reject one of the patents involved with a whole capture/throwing mechanic, which raises the potential for one of the main patents involved in the lawsuit to be thrown out. So maybe overextending wasn't a good look for Nintendo, but more on that later. The main reason why this patent was rejected by the GPO was because it didn't represent an inventive step, aka it was way too generic. They even cited several other prior games that used similar mechanics like Monster Hunter 4, Craftopia, Kantai Collection, and even Pokemon Go. I just found it funny when they cited Pokemon Go and Craftopia as reasons to why the patent was rejected, especially since Pokemon Go is very obviously an offshoot of, well, Pokemon, so a Nintendo-derived game helped beat their own patent. Not to mention the fact that Craftopia was a game previously developed by Pocket Pair to add more salt to the wound. While, of course, there's nothing concrete yet for the end result of the initial lawsuits, and Nintendo can appeal this rejection in the next month or two, it is important to note that the patent shot down by the JPO is an offshoot of one of the patents involved in the current Nintendo vs. Palworld lawsuit, meaning that it calls into question the validity of all the other patents that Nintendo is suing Pocket Pair for, and with any luck it will snowball into that. If you thought that was it for Nintendo's legal defeats, good news everyone! There's one more patent that's being re-examined in the US. That's right, now the US is also getting involved with re-examining the patents involved in the lawsuit. In early November of 2025, the US Patent and Trademark Office decided to re-examine the patent of summoning a character and letting it fight. While again, it is important to note that the US is only re-examining the patent, there is nothing concrete yet on whether or not they'll let it stay or reject it. The fact that this is even happening shows that the US is doubting Nintendo's lawsuit patents, which can lead to a rejection of it outright, and when the first one falls, the rest will also fall like a chain of dominoes. I'm honestly not too surprised that all of this is happening because, like I said before, Nintendo got way too greedy with the lawsuits and overextended heavily. I mean, surely this blatant pettiness from a multi-trillion-dollar company won't go unnoticed. Between rewording the writing object patent in an attempt to make it more vague, and trying to file enough patents that they're suing Palworld over to be valid in the US, essentially trying to retroactively punish Palworld with US-based patent violations, add on to the fact that they blatantly ignored other games that would also violate their patents that they're suing Palworld over, and as such should also be sued by Nintendo's logic. Just to be clear, I don't believe that those games should also be sued. I don't think any game should be sued for this. I'm just saying that if Nintendo genuinely cared about their patents, they would have done something about it way before Palworld. I've already listed a fair bit of games that utilize similar mechanics to what Nintendo is suing Pocket Pair for, but I can give you way more examples. Titanfall 2, Rune Factory 5, and Path of Exile. Nintendo is only laser focusing down Palworld, making very little attempt to hide the fact that the lawsuits are petty in nature and are only punishing Pocket Pair for making a wildly successful Pokemon with Guns game, and it's no wonder why various legal departments across the world are doing the double take and side-eyeing the Nintendo patents involved in the lawsuit as a result. It's still a bit too early to tell what the final result of the Nintendo vs. Palworld lawsuit will be, but I genuinely hope that these noticeable legal cracks caused by the US and Japan patent offices will call into question the lawsuit, resulting in Palworld's victory, since judges will generally respect the findings of patent examiners, even if those findings aren't legally binding. Add on to the fact that the patents rejected / re-examined are very similar to the patents that Nintendo is suing for, or just outright another copy but in the US, and now there's a decent chance that these events will cascade into the rest of the patents being rejected. But so far that's it for major developments in the Palworld vs. Nintendo lawsuit. If there are any more developments that drop while making this video, I'll let you guys know, but I do want to pivot just a little bit. While the whole legal aspect is well known and documented at this point, there is also a social aspect ever present in the background. We witnessed it in full swing before when Palworld was first taking off, where Nintendo fans were making a bunch of insane false claims about Palworld, and unfortunately, it is still ever present during the lawsuits. If anything, it seems to have emboldened people in some cases. The first point is pretty minor, it's just a bunch of people who conflated Nintendo suing over patents with suing over copyright and doing simple misinformation. One person says, Nintendo announced that they are officially suing Pocket Pair, the developer of Palworld, for copyright infringement. No, that's blatantly not the case. It even outright states in the image that this dude attached to his post that Nintendo is suing for patent infringements, not copyright. Those are two very different things. Copyright involves protecting original created works in a tangible form, such as character designs, while patents are used for protecting inventions for a set time from being copied / made by unauthorized parties, with the invention in this case being certain game mechanics. This post also semi-ignited the whole Palworld copied Pokemon designs discourse again, with someone saying how, I saw a lot of people saying how Nintendo wasn't going to do anything and how they were pretty quick with a lawsuit filing, as well as how there was no excuse for Palworld using Pokemon assets. How about the fact that Palworld never did in the first place? Nintendo didn't even mention anything related to Pokemon designs. They're only suing for game design patents, for starters. If one of the biggest gaming companies can't find any proof of Palworld plagiarizing Pokemon designs, something tells me there's not any plagiarism going on. It kind of just makes you guys look really schizo and that no one should take you seriously. I'm just surprised that people are still peddling the whole Palworld blatantly copied Pokemon narrative. Yes, it is very obvious that some designs are Pokemon inspired, I will not lie. But no, Pocket Pair does not use recycled / copied Pokemon assets to make their designs. There is zero plagiarism involved, and it is very obvious that this is true, since Nintendo would have added that in along with your patent lawsuits if it wasn't. Please explain to me why, if Nintendo has such a clear-cut case of copyright infringement, why they wouldn't include that with the patents that they filed a lawsuit for. The most perfect view I think that summarizes how the average Nintendo superfan views this lawsuit though, can be expressed in this video where one of them takes issue with someone saying that they no longer support Nintendo and won't be buying the Switch 2. While most of the video involves said individual getting mad at someone else for not liking Nintendo after the Switch 2 release, despite the fact that there are plenty of things to not like the Switch 2 release for, such as the game key cards, which sound like they would be physical copies of the game, right? You know, just insert the cartridge in and you can instantly play it. but instead they contain a key to download the game online, making the physical copy you have pointless since you have to download the game online into your Switch 2 anyways. Why am I buying a physical game key when I can just buy and download the game online through the Nintendo eShop? I mean, in both cases I would have to download the game online anyways. Not to mention the fact that Joy-Con drift is still an ever-present plague, due to the fact that the Switch 2 Joy-Cons use a similar mechanism to the original Switch Joy-Cons, making them also susceptible to drift over time. To add on to the list of Switch 2 problems, they should not have a host of issues right out of release, such as screen ghosting, aka blurry trails in motion, and the terrible battery life that would rapidly drain your Switch 2's battery, so you couldn't even use your expensive Switch 2 for long without frequent recharging. I have heard that Nintendo was making some behind-the-scenes fixes to the Switch 2, mainly in regards to display and battery life, so I don't think the Switch 2 is the worst console on the planet right now. But I honestly expected better from Nintendo when they already had a previous generation of the Switch to work upon and improve in more meaningful ways. It still has the game key and Joy-Con drift issue, and the fact that the Switch 2 was able to be released with so many technical problems is still very disappointing, especially when the Switch 2 was released by Nintendo, one of the biggest gaming companies in the world. If you still like the Switch 2 after all this, good for you. I'm not trying to knock you for getting the Switch 2. If you like it, you do you, man. More power to you. I'm just saying that how Nintendo has handled the Switch 2 personally left a sour taste in my mouth, and based on that, I do not like the Switch 2 for reasons that I've previously mentioned. But back on topic, this dude has been reacting to her video for nearly an hour at this point, giving the classic expected Nintendo fanboy rebuttals to her, nothing new there. But then she proceeds to make the mistake of saying a magic phrase that activates the MK Ultra Sleeper Nintendo agent inside of him, and then he starts going off when she mentions a magic word, which in this case is Palworld.
We thought Gary Bowser's case was just a one-off or a legal overreach in a rare situation. It wasn't, because not long after that, Nintendo set its sights on something much bigger and arguably much more telling. You might have already guessed it, but I'm talking about Palworld. You probably remember.
Oh no, the giant code. Oh.
The nanosecond he hears that word, insta-lock-in, sleeper agent activated.
Oh no, oh no. She's gonna show for Palworld. If this, man, I can't wait until like Nintendo wins the lawsuit and these people have to take like a big fat L.
Woohoo, man! I love when the massive corporation uses its power to body slam other games/groups into the ground. Big W for the large companies, man. I love when a company is so desperate to stop another game from succeeding that they have to file lawsuits over something as vague as capturing creatures/creature mounts, and even then, they have to shiftily switch up their patents mid-lawsuit, and parts of their patents have also been rejected by both Japan and the US patent offices. So that should speak volumes to how good faith this lawsuit is. I also love how Nintendo blatantly ignores all the other games that also use creature capturing/mounting aspects to laser focus down Palworld, because that also definitely screams good faith. For crying out loud, there is a game on the Nintendo eShop store no less, called Palend, which if you couldn't tell by the name and gameplay is a quote-unquote Palworld ripoff. So the nicest thing you could say about Palworld right now is that it is a blatant Palworld ripoff, but then if I've been told that Palworld is just a Pokemon ripoff, so if Palworld is just a shameless copy of Pokemon, then by extension Palworld is also a shameless ripoff of Pokemon and should be sued. But instead it gets to be put straight up on Nintendo's eShop with no action taken against it. Let me reiterate this. A Pokemon Palworld-esque ripoff is currently sitting pretty up on Nintendo's own eShop no less, and they haven't done anything about it for the past 7 months this game's been out. And it's at a discount from the Nintendo eShop for the Switch 2. What a steal!
I am just so sick of seeing these people like try and pretend this game is like original, or that like it's like somehow like some new, fresh, exciting take on Pokemon. It's not. This has been like one of the most this I think will go down as like one of the most embarrassing moments of the decade. Like real talk, like this is like absolute cringe personified. Like just the refusal from like the Pal Bros to like acknowledge that Palworld is derivative from the like of Pokemon. Like I don't understand like just this. Look at that smug face. She's just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get so many views from this video. Like
Yeah, Palworld is so boring and unoriginal that people decide to flock to it by the millions. Personally, I think that's a bigger self-own on Nintendo's part, because if Palworld is the boring and unoriginal Pokemon copy, why is it having people flock to it en masse? Why aren't people flocking to play Pokemon instead if Palworld is so boring and unoriginal? Shouldn't we just be playing Pokemon instead if Palworld is so derivative from Pokemon? Crazy self-own on Nintendo implying that their Pokemon games are so boring now that people are moved by Palworld instead, aka the Pokemon ripoff.
Nintendo did what they've been doing for.
Well, like, the thing is, though, like, Palworld was never, ever competitive with Pokemon. Like, so many people, like, try and act like it was some huge hit, but it really wasn't.
If Nintendo and Palworld are supposed to be so different, why is Nintendo suing them then? And why did you refer to Palworld as a Pokemon knockoff earlier, when you're saying right now that Palworld and Pokemon are supposed to be so different?
And it hasn't maintained its relevancy, while Nintendo's put out, like, several Pokemon games since it came out. Like, it's kind of crazy that, like, this game plagiarized Legends Arceus specifically, and, Legends ZA is coming out this year. That goes to show you just how quick, like, Nintendo's turnaround time with this stuff actually is.
Also, for your other point of Nintendo releasing multiple Pokemon games in a short period of time. Yeah, Nintendo releases multiple Pokemon games in a short time, and the quality of them really shows. I'm honestly surprised Nintendo didn't go the Black Ops 7 route and start putting AI artwork into their games yet.
They sued. Together with the Pokemon Company, they filed a patent infringement lawsuit against the Palworld dev team. Not over character design, surprisingly, not even over branding, but over mechanics. Things.
Yeah. The mechanics that they stole from Pokemon games. Yeah, so, like, people always say this, like, well, they didn't sue for character designs because, yeah, the plagiarism goes a lot deeper than that. Like, they straight up rip mechanics from Legends Arceus, and this is pretty obvious if you actually played Legends Arceus, but.
Yeah, Pokemon has such cutting-edge game mechanics, such as capturing creatures and making them fight for you, as well as creature mounts. Truly innovative and Pokemon-exclusive features that no other game has used until Palworld arrived on the scene. How delusional do you have to be to think that only Pokemon has done / should be allowed to use these game mechanics? Also, your statement on Nintendo not suing for copyright because the plagiarism goes a lot more deeper makes no sense. If Palworld genuinely stole and copied designs, why would Nintendo not also sue for that? Wouldn't it make more sense for Nintendo to include these copyright infringements in their lawsuit? At this point, the only reason why is because Palworld didn't plagiarize Pokemon designs. Also, suing over vague game mechanics like capturing creatures and making them fight or creature mounts is stupid. That's like if the Fine Bros actually copyrighted the word react and sued someone for using that word. Nintendo is taking generalized game mechanics and suing over them.
Throwing a pal spear to catch creatures, using them in combat, riding them across.
Yep. That is derivative. Yep.
The world. And because of all of this,
They're describing how the game literally works. I don't understand, like, what the big controversy about this is. It's just so dumb.
That's because it's a large company filing a lawsuit over patents when before they would normally send cease and desists over copyright in previous takedown events. So the switch up in tactics is noteworthy. It is also noteworthy to observe the fact that Nintendo has had to change wording in their patents to be more vague, and the fact that they only went after Palworld, despite the litany of other games I've already mentioned that also, by your logic, plagiarize and steal from Nintendo since they involve capturing creatures or riding them, or a combination of the both.
Team had to actually go in and change all of those features. They stripped out mechanics that players loved, not because they were unethical, but because they simply couldn't defend themselves against.
What? They were unethical. Like, again, they wouldn't.
Unethical for having game mechanics such as capturing / taming / mounting creatures. Get your head out of Nintendo's ass, holy shit. By that logic, so many other games would be considered unethical. Titanfall 2, Rune Factory 5, Risk of Rain 2, Path of Exile, and many more other games. All of these games utilize some form of one or more of these patents that Nintendo is suing over. Are those games also unethical? Did they also steal from Pokemon?
If their game was so, like, illegal proof, then, like, why couldn't they defend themselves? Like again, like I remember when people were saying that Nintendo would never file a lawsuit, and, like, here we are, like, a couple of years later, seeing people like this, like, just complain about it. It's just, yeah, this is just a cope.
You do realize that you can file a lawsuit for anything, right? For instance, I could sue you for this absolute dog water video that you made. All anyone needs to do to sue someone is deliver well-formatted letters to a court, pay any court fees, and then deliver the papers to the offending party. But that usually requires a lot of time and money, which, in case you haven't noticed, Nintendo has plenty of, allowing them to file lawsuits at will. Even if the lawsuit doesn't work out for them, they have the resources to financially recoup their losses.
Because this could have been a big moment for Nintendo, a wake-up call, an opportunity for them to ask, what is it that people are responding to? Why are they so excited about this? What can we learn from this? But instead of innovation, they chose litigation. And to me,
Pokemon takes like a lot of influences from like other RPG franchises. I think Pokemon Sun and Moon, it took a lot of influences from Yokai Watch actually, with like the goofy animations, like the Z moves and stuff like that. Like they didn't go after Palworld because they saw it as a threat. They went after it because of the obvious plagiarism. I don't understand what's so like difficult to understand about this.
What you're not getting is that it's because the plagiarism in question is vague game mechanics like making creatures fight for you, capturing them, and creature mounts. Which, sorry for sounding like a broken record here, a large portion of games that people play utilize at least one or some combination of these mechanics, making it very obvious that Nintendo isn't conducting this lawsuit in good faith. Also, it's funny how you accept that Pokemon, by your logic, would have ripped off Yokai Watch and a game dev/company behind them should sue Nintendo, since by your logic, Pokemon is clearly just plagiarizing Yokai Watch if reusing traits from their game is enough to count for plagiarism, by your logic. Isn't that your argument against Palworld? Speaking of plagiarism from copying game mechanics, Nintendo recently announced Pokopia around September, and I couldn't help but notice that this game adapts similar concepts from Stardew Valley with the cozy farming sim aspect, and Minecraft with the building mechanics. I'm just saying, it's funny how Nintendo can sue for vague concepts like creature mount/capture, but then they have no issues copying other games when it suits them. Rules for thee, but not for me.
I remember when Nintendo Online was first announced. It sounded like such a win, a way to legally revisit classic.
Wait, what are you talking about? Like, everyone was spurting out about that day one. I was the only person, who was like defending Nintendo Switch Online at the time, and like, there's been like a huge uptick of interest in the service like over the years, but like, yeah, there are still a lot of YouTubers, and I mean a lot of them, who are like constantly like downplaying this thing. It's embarrassing, but
Play old favorites, dive back into the library that...
Yeah, figures Hisu was one of the only people defending the paid Nintendo Online service. As someone who was actively playing games on my Switch at the time when they first implemented it, let me tell you why Nintendo Online being a paid subscription service sucks, aside from the obvious of a once free thing needing money now. As in a Vivid Splatoon tour back in the day, the Nintendo Online connection, for lack of a better term, was straight ass cheeks, no cap, resulting in a lot of DC'd games, which while being annoying and very aggravating to deal with, was offset by the fact that it was at least a free service. But then they made it a paid subscription, and you would think that if they are making you pay money for it, the connection would at least get better. But nope, I was still subject to the same amount of DCs as before. But now I actually have to pay to get DC'd. Literally just pay to lose. So you can imagine now why people aren't too thrilled that they have to now pay for a shitty service when it was at least free before.
And now, with the launch of the Switch 2, I thought maybe they would just try to clean things up a bit. GameCube has finally joined the retro lineup, which is very awesome, but they only added 3 games at launch. Wind Waker...
Wow, 3 games, like I've been playing the only GameCube game I've been playing day one is Soul Calibur 2, right? Like I played like a little bit of Wind Waker, but I got to the ship and I stopped playing. So like, I've been playing Soul Calibur 2, and I've been putting all this time into it. I've been going through Weapon Master mode. I played arcade mode with every single character. I've done all this stuff. Like, that game is not short, okay? Like, it takes a while to like do everything in Soul Calibur 2, especially when you're playing so many other games like I am. I love Soul Calibur 2, but I didn't need more than 3 games for GameCube, because like all these games are pretty lengthy. They all have like so much going on. There's other games coming out on the platform. Like, why exactly are so many people like complaining about like, oh, there's not a whole lot on this service? Well, have you played every single game on there? Like, have you played everything you're interested in? Like, are you intimately familiar with every single game on the service? No? Then, like, why are you complaining? And that's kind of like my mentality on this. Like, there is no way that this broad has played through, like, all 3 of these games day one. Especially, yeah. She doesn't even own a Switch 2. So she's played exactly none of them. And she's still going to turn around and, like, complain about the launch lineup anyway. Like, oh, there's not enough games. Like, we already have a lineup of launch window games that will probably be coming out throughout the year. You know, a lot of major titles. And, you know, we're probably going to get, like, you know, games from other studios as well. Like, what exactly is she complaining about? You know, the rate of uploads for Nintendo Switch Online is good enough. You know, like, what do you mean? Like, oh, not everything is on there. Yeah, well, no shit. You know, it doesn't make any sense.
I'm glad you enjoyed the 3 games from the GameCube selection, but have you considered that other people want to play GameCube games that aren't those 3? Why are we supposed to accept only those 3 games simply because you enjoyed playing them? Aren't you supposed to be a Nintendo Super fanboy? Don't you want more game options to play from the GameCube? The crazy part is that he had a good point with, oh, maybe they'll add more GameCube games later on.
Like, what's the point of launching with, like, everything right from the get-go?
But the spiel about being expected to be satisfied with only 3 GameCube games because you had fun playing them is downright delusional.
Soul Calibur 2 and F-Zero GX. Like, yeah, that's a cool trio, I guess, but it's also...
I guess! Like, 2 of those are 2 of my favorite games of all time! Like, you know, F-Zero GX I don't care about, but, like, Soul Calibur 2, like, and Wind Waker are huge deals, you know? Like, oh, that's a good trinity, I guess. Like, did you play these games at all?
Not everyone's going to have fun, like, or be satisfied with those 3 games. Just because you did doesn't mean others will or have to.
Now, again, to be clear, this video is not meant to shame anybody. If you bought the Switch 2 or you're a part of Nintendo Online and you're loving it, I think that's great. Truly, I am not here to steal joy away from anyone. This video really is just to talk about how I can't ignore.
I hate this fake positivity.
Relationship with Nintendo has changed over the years, and I don't love them anymore. Not the company.
I don't love them anymore.
And that's difficult.
I don't love you anymore. I want to break up. I want a divorce. Like, it's just like, wow. I hate this fake niceness. Pisses me off.
On these games.
What did you want her to say then? Oh, if you bought the Switch 2, you are a retarded picky who should kill themselves and die a painful death. You should die violently from cancer AIDS. Would that be better for you? How dare someone have issues with a product, but have no issues if people still enjoy said product? This whole video is basically just this dude upset that someone else no longer likes Nintendo anymore, and baby raging at the fact that she grew disillusioned with Nintendo. Personally, I think it's more embarrassing to froth at the mouth because people no longer like Nintendo and act like their personal attack dog to the point of spewing off misinfo and bending over backwards to justify Nintendo's shitty actions. For someone who likes to talk a lot about people
coping and seething,
you sure like to do it a lot. You just angrily make claims without any sort of proof to back up what you're saying and then expect people to just believe you. I also think it's funny that this dude tried to humegalol a content creator with hundreds of thousands of subs on a video with 650,000 views.
Come on, unbelievable. This is just embarrassing. It really is. I don't know who any of these people are, like any of these nobody YouTubers that like people prop up, but like it really needs to stop. It's just embarrassing kind of seeing what like people like this are trying to say about Switch 2 and like it's early days.
Like, dude, have some self-awareness. Based on the massive amounts of views and comments, it's pretty safe to assume that this isn't just some random nobody hating on Nintendo for no reason, and this feeling of Nintendo not being a good company is a growing sentiment among many people, and for good reason. While I freely acknowledge that Nintendo has made many great games, you can also admit that they have tons of other issues. These 2 statements are not contradictory. You are simply just 2 sides cucked to realize this, making excuse after excuse for every shitty action that Nintendo has done. This video is a prime example of tribalism and how it affects the pro-Nintendo side. They are not at all willing to even entertain the thought of the fact that their favorite company can fumble from time to time, instead opting to blindly defend the mega corporation every step of the way, no matter how valid it is.
This has been like one of the most this I think will go down as like one of the most embarrassing moments of the decade.
I think it's a bigger embarrassment to act completely rabid over someone not liking Nintendo and justifying shitty lawsuits. But you do you, man. The fundamental flaw, aside from this suit gargling it down to the shaft and balls for Nintendo, is that all the anti-Palworld points that he had were best case subjective, like how he thinks Palworld is just an edgier Pokemon.
Pokemon wants to go for a more wholesome, like, branding, and that's worked out really well for them. Like, Palworld is, like, tailor-made for, like, terminally online internet weirdos, right? Like, who are just unhinged and, like, legit want to see Pokemon as slaves and shit like that.
And worst case, dishonest. Like how Nintendo apparently has a clear-cut case with the lawsuits despite all the litany of other games that also stole from Nintendo.
Yeah. The mechanics that they stole from Pokemon games. Yeah, so, like...
Was there creature capture / creature mount mechanics, but at this point I'm sounding like a broken record with that talking point. This video also aged horrifically due to the fact that multiple patents that Nintendo filed that are closely related to the patents in a lawsuit that they are directly suing Palworld for have been rejected in both the Japan and US patent offices, meaning that there is a very real chance that the original patents will also be shut down since there's precedent now that the patents involved in the lawsuits now aren't going to be innovative enough based on their close relatives being denied for the mentioned reason. All in all though, while the lawsuit is still an ever-present shadow, it is not without a couple rays of hope, as there are legal cracks in the foundation of the lawsuit due to the inherently unstable legal nature of suing over generic game mechanics, while ignoring all the other games that would also commit patent infringement by Nintendo's logic. It's also nice to see the same flawed attitude that people have from Palworld's initial release carry over onto the lawsuit, and they arrogantly continue to parrot the same flawed talking points even after all of this time. So to sum up this entire video, it is clear based on the comments that I have observed from Palworld's initial release to present day that there is a certain bias that people have regarding Palworld. While you can make the argument that certain designs in Palworld were inspired by Pokemon, to say that Palworld is some sort of Pokemon copycat or ripoff is simply not true. Especially when you factor in the fact that Palworld plays completely different from Pokemon. You do realize that with broad concepts such as capturing fantasy creatures, there's bound to be a bit of overlap from time to time that doesn't involve copying / plagiarizing. Now, I don't mind if you simply dislike Palworld and think that it's just another generic Pokemon with guns ripoff. That's fine and isn't the reason why I made this video. I made this video because of the sheer amount of malicious misinfo and justifications for one of the biggest gaming companies in the world to file frivolous lawsuits. From outright spreading misinformation and lies like how Palworld outright copied Pokemon models and used AI, to saying how Palworld deserved to be sued in a bad faith patent lawsuit for using generic game mechanics. Despite the fact that Nintendo is very clearly only doing this in order to punish Palworld for succeeding massively. It's also super annoying how these Nintendo fanboys act about it too. They have so much ego and are so smug, making excuse after excuse as to why Nintendo's patents are actually valid. It just goes to show you what tribalism can do to a MF, completely unable to check themselves and end up looking like a complete ass. Nintendo looks even worse so with their handling of the lawsuit. After they couldn't sue for copyright infringement, they resorted to patent lawsuits and sued Pocket Pair for the crime of having super generic game mechanics such as creatures to capture and tame / mount, making no effort to hide the fact that this lawsuit was purely to attack Palworld, between ignoring the wide variety of games that also utilize creature capture, taming, and mounting such as in Terraria, World of Warcraft, Craftopia, and many more. Then once the lawsuit is filled out, midway through they attempt to change the wording on one of the patents in an attempt to make it more vague, basically legally shifting goalposts. Then after that, they attempt to file additional patents in the US related to the lawsuit patents. Afterwards, patent offices in both the US and Japan decide to reject patents closely related to the patents involved in the lawsuit, deeming them too vague to be actual patents. So with Nintendo hitting legal walls, it looks like the lawsuit has lost all momentum, and with any luck, the lawsuit will be Pocket Pair sided. Regardless of how this lawsuit pans out though, the patents that Nintendo is suing over are very stupid, and the legal fees for both Pocket Pair and Nintendo will be very costly, and overall just be a huge waste of time for everyone, regardless of who wins. All because Nintendo couldn't handle another competing game. As for the people defending this, if you don't like Palworld, fine, but there's no need to cheer on insane lawsuits and lie about Palworld. That's all I have to say. See ya.
What do you know? Better be the 1500. It's my